Hey guys, so welcome to this extra video, which is going to talk about an alternate method of finding the other endpoint of a segment when given the midpoint and one of the endpoints. So in the original video, I looked at it from a graphical perspective. I looked at it where we plotted the 2 points, we looked at the horizontal distance, we looked at the vertical distance, and we basically did some counting to find that other endpoint. The advantage is that this is less work than what I'm going to show you in this short video, but it also is more obscure, maybe a little harder to memorize and remember the process. So I'm going to show you a more algebraic, formulaic method of doing this problem. So the first thing I need you to recognize is that the midpoint formula, which is written as x1 plus x2 over 2, and then the y portion is written as y1 plus y2 over 2, that those two things actually equal something, right? When you use the midpoint formula, and you add the two x endpoints and divide by 2, that's going to give you the x midpoint. So I'm writing that little subscript m to remind you that that means midpoint. y1 plus y2 over 2 is going to equal the y coordinate of our midpoint. And so we're going to use these two formulas to help us answer this question from an algebraic perspective. So let's go ahead and let's look at letter A. All right, in letter A, I'm giving one of the endpoints is 2. We're talking about x's first. And I'm given that the midpoint is 8. So if I use this formula, x1 is essentially going to be the 2. We do not know what x2 is, so we're just going to call it x. That's our missing variable. Divide it by 2 equals, and then the midpoint, the x sub m that it's going to equal is 8 in this scenario. And we're going to solve that in just a moment. But let's set up the y1 as well, because -1 is going to be my y1. So we're going to say -1 plus, we don't know the other endpoint, so we're going to call it y. We're going to divide it by 2 again, and we know that that has to equal the y coordinate of the midpoint, which in this case is 3. Now, each of these equations are to be solved independent of each other, separate of each other, but their answers will give us the full picture of what the other endpoint is going to be. So let's solve the red one first. You're always going to solve these by getting rid of the fraction first, multiplying both sides by 2. So this is going to give me 2 plus x equals 16. We'll subtract 2 from both sides to get the x coordinate by itself, and we get an answer of 14. Now let's pause on that and let's go over to our y equation here. We're going to also multiply both sides by 2 to start. Just cancel. We get -1 plus y equals 3 times 2 is 6. We'll then add 1 to both sides. So y will equal 7 here. So these numbers are my two coordinates that will find that other endpoint. And so my final answer here will be 14, 7. Final answer here. I'll zoom back out so we can take a look at that. Okay. Now we're going to try this with the other example as well. Same thing as before though. All right. So I have my formula there on the left-hand side. I know my midpoint is here, or sorry, my endpoint is there. So that's my x1. This is my x midpoint. Feel free to pause, by the way, if you want to try this first and then listen to my explanation after. So my equation would be -4 plus x, we don't know the other endpoint, divided by 2 equals 1. We're going to do the same thing with the y's. So this is my y endpoint. So -5 plus y divided by 2 equals, and then this is my y midpoint, 2. Once again, after these are set up, you are to solve these equations separately from each other. So we'll multiply both sides by 2. That gives me -4 plus x equals 2. We're going to try to get x by itself. We're going to add 4 to both sides. So x is equal to 6. There's my first. For my second, we're going to multiply again by 2 for y. -5 plus y equals 4. We'll add 5 to both sides. Y is equal to 9. And these are the same answers we got from the original video, but we're looking at it from a different lens, from an algebraic lens. And so my other midpoint here is going to be 6, 9. So as we wrap up this mini video, once again, I want to take you back to this. We're basically taking the formula that we already learned, the midpoint formula, and creating two separate equations. One for the x coordinates and one for the y coordinates. Solve each of them separate and independent of each other, and then we'll take those two answers and create our new ordered pair, which is going to be the other endpoint. Hope this video was helpful. I hope some of you are watching this and see this as maybe a more helpful, straightforward method rather than using that visual method I showed in the first video. But at the end of the day, the choice is yours. Do you want to try the visual method of solving this, or do you want to look at a more algebraic method? Decide which one's best for you, and let's work forward from there. Thank you for watching.